The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Now a man was ill, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but it is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." He said this and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him." So the disciples said to him, "Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved." But Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, "Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him." So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us go also to die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give to you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, the one who is coming into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, "The teacher is here and asking for you." As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house comforting her saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled and said, "Where have you laid him?" They said, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. It has been 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In perhaps her most well-known short story, entitled "A Good Man is Hard to Find," one of Flannery O'Connor's most notorious characters, aka the Misfit, makes a rather interesting remark about Christ. As the story is building to its rather macabre conclusion, the Misfit says to an old woman, "Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, and he shouldn't have done that. He's thrown everything off balance." Well, yes, I suppose he has. But then again, I suppose that was probably the point. And certainly that is the point of what is going on here today. The events of this gospel are somewhat off by one degree or another. They are unfolding in a way that your average person isn't used to seeing. And as per usual, it is Christ who is standing at the heart of it all. But even his behaviors seem more unusual than what they usually are. So, let's take a look at them. Jesus gets word that his friend is sick. And what happens? He remained for 2 days in the place where he was. In fact, John says that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. The phrasing here, the order of it, the use of the word "so," all indicate that Jesus didn't go to visit Lazarus because he was sick. Given Christ's track record up to this point, one might have thought that this little scene might have played out a little differently. Maybe something like this. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, Jesus got up and immediately left for Bethany so that he might be with him. But Jesus, he doesn't do this. He doesn't appear to even consider this as a possible course of action. And not only does Jesus stay away, he does nothing to prevent the illness from doing any more damage, which he could have done. We have seen before that with just a word, Jesus can heal people who are nowhere near him. The centurion's slave and the royal official's son both prove that the power of Jesus to heal is not bound by any sort of geographical restrictions. But again, Jesus doesn't do this either. He allows the illness to endure, and eventually Lazarus succumbs. Any hope of Lazarus recovering dies with him. And Jesus lets this happen. He lets Lazarus die. He knows that Lazarus is sick. He has the time to get there, and even if he doesn't, he has the power to heal from a distance. He has a significant emotional relationship with this man and with his family. He loves them. And yet, he does nothing. He lets death have control. He lets death take hold of Lazarus and drag him into the underworld. He lets a shadow of sadness descend upon the home of Mary and Martha. And then he waits. He allows time to pass so that corruption and decay can start their work on Lazarus' body. But the unusual behavior doesn't end there. After revealing to his disciples that Lazarus has died, he says to them, "I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe." Now, Jesus was not glad that Lazarus was dead. In the shortest verse of the entirety of Scripture, we are told that Jesus went to where they laid Lazarus, and he wept. Remember, Jesus is a man like us in all things except sin, so he wept because his friend had died. He mourned with Martha and Mary and their friends because he was hurting. But the suffering that Jesus experiences and the suffering that he permitted the family and friends of Lazarus to experience are both part of a greater truth that has slowly been revealing itself since the prologue of the gospel we just read from. It says, all things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life. Jesus is the author of life. And now, with the raising of Lazarus from the dead, John is establishing for us that Jesus is also the master of death, which I think you'll agree is important for us to be aware of, given what's about to happen in a few weeks. John is also establishing for us that there is nothing that is beyond the power of Jesus' realm of control. But given that belief is not always easy, Jesus says to those who are with him, I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Jesus is telling his followers, I am going to show you something that is going to shatter your perceptions on what you think is possible. Jesus is telling them, I am going to show you something that will leave you with no doubt that I am who I say I am. I am going to show you something because you need to be ready. Because something is going to happen to me. Something that will terrify you. Something that will upset you and shock you and scatter you. But on that day, I will need you to remember this day, because this will not be the last time that you will encounter a once occupied tomb that now stands empty. Presumably, this story would have spread like wildfire throughout the region. It would have had to. And because of these events, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen what he had done began to believe in him. And honestly, after witnessing something like this, what choice do you have left? Which brings me back to Miss Flannery's misfit. After the misfit's disapproval of Jesus raising people from the dead, he goes on to say, if he did what he said, then there's nothing for you to do but to throw everything away and follow him. If Lazarus was dead and then he wasn't, if Jesus was dead and then he wasn't, if all of this is real and we believe that it's real, then giving up everything to follow him should not be a problem. But sometimes it is. Sometimes we hear the voice of Jesus calling out to us, come out! But instead of coming forth, we remain entombed, buried away in the tombs of our own sins, of our own doubts, of our own fears, of our own worries, of our own opinions, of our own egos, buried away where decay and corruption have already begun to do their work. How long are we to remain wrapped up in the bandages of bondage and shrouded in the darkness of despair, refusing to come forth? How long are we going to remain dead? Brothers and sisters, the hour of salvation is fast approaching. The time for us to vacate the tombs we have become all too accustomed to is upon us. For Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in him, even if he dies, will never die. It's time to come out and follow Jesus unreservedly. And if we are to follow Jesus, we are to pick up our crosses daily. If we are to follow Jesus, we are to die to ourselves. But at the same time, if we are to follow Jesus, then just like Lazarus, we too need to come out and leave our tombs behind.